The Intergalactic Research and Educational Exchange Station floated in neutral space, a gleaming testament to cooperative scientific endeavor. Its twisting corridors and specialized habitats housed representatives from over 30 sentient species, each with their own unique physiologies, cultural backgrounds, and approaches to knowledge. The station had been specifically designed to accommodate extreme environmental needs, from the methane-rich atmosphere required by the gaseous Vaporians to the high-pressure chambers that kept the crystalline Xylars comfortable. Elias Vance pulled his standard-issue medical bag over his shoulder and checked his tablet one last time. The notification that had appeared that morning still glowed on the screen. Assignment update. Medical support. Incoming exchange group. Doc 17, 0900 hours. He sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. After 15 years as a combat medic on the frontier and another 10 working emergency response on various space stations, Elias had seen just about everything the universe could throw at a human body. He'd patched up plasma burns, reattached limbs, and once performed emergency surgery during a gravitational fluctuation. But this assignment, babysitting a bunch of interspecies students, felt like a step down. The higher-ups had called it a valuable cultural exchange opportunity. Elias called it glorified first aid duty. Still, orders were orders. And maybe, he thought as he made his way through the station's main thoroughfare, a bit of quiet would do him good. His last post on the mining colony of Series 7 had been one emergency after another. The docking bay was already bustling when he arrived. A sleek, iridescent transport vessel had just completed its docking procedures, and the first of the exchange students were beginning to disembark. Elias stood back, observing the variety of beings with a professional eye, mentally cataloging the different physiologies and potential medical needs. There were 4 crystalline Xylars, their faceted bodies refracting light in dazzling patterns as they carefully navigated the exit ramp. Their translucent structures appeared delicate, but Elias knew they were actually quite resilient to most forms of physical trauma. Next came a group of Marian amphibians, their moist skin glistening under the bay lights, supported by personal hydration fields. A tall, insectoid Arthean followed, its compound eyes swiveling to take in the entire bay at once. Medic Vance. A voice pulled his attention away from the newcomers. He turned to find a human woman extending her hand. Professor Amara Liu, Xenobiology. I'm coordinating this exchange group. Elias shook her hand. Elias Vance. Medical support. Glad to have you on board. This is an exciting group, some of the brightest minds from their respective planets. We'll be conducting a series of field studies on the nearby moon over the next few months. She handed him a data tablet. Here's the medical profiles for all 32 students. We've included baseline physiology, recommended treatments for common ailments, and emergency protocols. Elias skimmed through the files, noting that most of the information was theoretical at best. Interspecies medicine was still a developing field, with more unknowns than certainties. Any particular concerns I should be aware of? He asked. Professor Liu hesitated. The Xylars are particularly sensitive about their physical integrity. They consider even minor fractures potentially catastrophic. And the gaseous Zephian students. She nodded toward 2 floating containment suits housing swirling, colorful gases, have very specific pressure requirements. Otherwise, nothing unusual. Most of them have their own species-specific medical kits for specialized needs. Elias nodded. Got it. I'll introduce myself once they're settled. The orientation proceeded smoothly. The students were shown to their customized quarters, given a tour of the educational facilities, and briefed on safety protocols. Elias found himself observing more than participating, studying the various species and their interactions. By afternoon, Professor Liu had organized a preliminary field excursion to collect environmental samples from the station's attached botanical dome, a controlled environment that simulated the moon's surface conditions. It would be a simple, low-risk introduction to their field methodology. Remember, Liu instructed the assembled students, this is just a practice run. Observe proper safety protocols. The gravity here is calibrated to match our research site, which may feel slightly different for some of you. The students moved through the dome in small groups, collecting soil samples, cataloging the engineered plant life, and taking atmospheric readings. Elias followed at a distance, first aid kit in hand, feeling somewhat superfluous. That feeling vanished in an instant when a sharp, crystalline scream cut through the dome. Fracture. Structural integrity breach. Emergency assistance required. The panicked voice spoke in the common galactic language, but with the distinct harmonic overtones of a Xylar. Elias sprinted toward the sound, finding a small group of students huddled around one of the Xylars. The crystalline being, whom Elias recognized from the manifest as TYX, was holding one faceted arm carefully suspended. A hairline crack, no more than a centimeter long, was visible across one of the crystal planes. The reaction among the alien students was immediate and extreme. The other Xylars had backed away, their crystalline forms vibrating in apparent distress. Several were rapidly communicating in their native language, a series of high-pitched tones that made Elias's teeth ache. The Marian amphibians looked horrified, their throat sacs inflating and deflating rapidly in their species' display of anxiety. An insectoid Arthean student was already pulling out a complex-looking device from a pack. "We need a molecular stabilizer. The crack could propagate through the entire structural matrix. Prepare a phase field generator," called one of the Xylars. "If we don't establish a containment field, complete disintegration could occur within hours." The nanoregeneration protocol, began another student. Elias pushed through the increasingly frantic crowd, kneeling beside the injured student. "Everyone step back, please. Give me some room." The students fell silent, watching with a mixture of dread and anticipation as Elias examined the injury. He carefully inspected the crack, noting its depth, orientation, and whether any fragments had been displaced. "Can you move your structural components without pain?" he asked TYX, using the formal terminology he'd read in the Xylar medical file. "Why, yes," TYX replied, the crystalline voice trembling slightly. "But movement may accelerate the propagation pattern. According to standard medical protocols, I should remain absolutely motionless until a stabilization field can be established." Elias completed his examination and straightened up. The assembled students seemed to be holding their breath, those that breathed anyway, waiting for him to announce some complex treatment plan. "It's just a surface fracture," he said calmly. "No structural displacement. We'll clean it, apply a cooling pack to reduce vibrational stress, and monitor for any changes. You'll be fine." There was a moment of stunned silence. But the internal stress patterns could be propagating even now," protested one of the other Xylar students. "On our world, even minor structural anomalies require immediate molecular realignment." Elias removed a small device from his medical bag, a simple cold compress that activated when bent. He wrapped it carefully around TYX's injured limb. "This will reduce thermal expansion and help stabilize the area," he explained. "The fracture is superficial. Your body's natural molecular bonds will re-establish themselves with a bit of time and rest." That's it," TYX asked, multifaceted eyes reflecting confusion. "Just cool it and wait." "Just ice it and you'll be fine," Elias confirmed. "I'll check it again tomorrow, but yes, that's it." The ripple of disbelief among the students was almost palpable. Elias could see them exchanging glances, or whatever passed for glances among the various sensory appendages present. The Arthean students still held the unused molecular stabilizer, looking, as much as an insectoid could look, utterly perplexed. "Human medicine is primitive," whispered one of the Marians to a companion, not quite quietly enough. Elias pretended not to hear, finishing his work with a cold compress. "Keep this on for 20 minutes, then take it off for an hour, then reapply. Minimize strenuous movement for the rest of the day. Come see me tomorrow morning." As he packed up his supplies, he could feel the undercurrent of uncertainty. These students, the brightest scientific minds of their respective worlds, clearly thought he was either incompetent or negligent, or both. Well, Elias thought as he helped TYX to stand, they'd learn soon enough. The story of TYX's untreated critical injury spread through the exchange program like wildfire. By the next morning, Elias found his medical office conspicuously empty despite the minor scrapes and adjustments that typically brought new arrivals seeking help during their first days in an unfamiliar environment. When he checked in on TYX, he found Zyler surrounded by concerned classmates, including the 3 other crystalline beings from their homeworld. As Elias approached, he could hear their harmonizing tones of distress. "How's the arm feeling today?" he asked, deliberately keeping his tone casual. TYX extended the limb for examination, the movement hesitant. "The pain receptors have reduced their signaling by approximately 43%, but I remain concerned about the structural integrity." Elias carefully unwrapped the protective covering the student had applied overnight. The crack was barely visible now, just the faintest line across the crystalline surface. "Looking good," Elias said, running a scanner over the area. "The fracture is already reintegrating. Your molecular structure is realigning itself naturally." "That's unexpected," TYX admitted. "On my homeworld, treatment would have involved a 3-day molecular reconstruction process. Sometimes less is more," Elias replied with a small smile. "Your species evolved remarkable self-repair capabilities. Often, the best medicine is just giving your body the right conditions to heal itself." The other Xylars leaned in, their crystalline forms catching the light as they examined their classmate's arm with evident surprise. This contradicts established Xylar medical literature. One of them noted their tone somewhere between accusatory and confused. Elias shrugged. "Different environments, different approaches. The high-tech solutions you're used to might be optimized for your home planet's conditions or for more severe injuries. For minor issues like this, simple approaches often work best." He could tell his explanation hadn't fully convinced them, but at least they were listening now. It was a start. Over the next 2 weeks, Elias found himself dealing with a series of minor incidents, each following a similar pattern. A Marian student developed small patches of dryness on their amphibious skin after spending too long in a less humid section of the station. The student's companions had immediately suggested a full molecular hydration treatment involving complex equipment, but Elias simply provided a basic moisturizing solution and recommended more frequent breaks in hydration chambers. An Arthean student caught one of their secondary limbs in a closing door, resulting in a minor exoskeleton dent. Rather than the surgical restructuring their peers frantically proposed, Elias applied a simple brace and anti-inflammatory compound. A Zephian gaseous student experienced slight discoloration after passing through an unexpected temperature gradient. Instead of the complete atmospheric reconstitution their medical textbooks prescribed, Elias recommended a few hours in their preferred environmental conditions and a simple nutrient supplement. Each time, the students reacted with initial skepticism, followed by surprise when their conditions improved with minimal intervention. And each time, Elias patiently explained his reasoning, emphasizing the remarkable resilience built into most life forms. Not everyone was convinced. During the 3rd week, as the students prepared for their first actual expedition to the moon's surface, Elias found himself confronted by a group of concerned student representatives in the medical office. Thar, a mammalian phalaron with dense fur and keen eyes, seemed to have been designated as spokesperson. Beside him stood Zyla, a Florian whose plant-based body featured delicate leaf-like sensors that constantly adjusted to the environment. They were accompanied by 2 other students, a Marian and one of the Xylars. "Medic Vance," Thar began, his voice a rumbling purr. "We wish to express concerns regarding the medical protocols being implemented for the exchange program." Elias leaned back in his chair. "I'm listening." Zyla stepped forward, her leaf appendages rustling softly. "We have compiled data from 17 recent incidents requiring medical attention. In 15 of these cases, your treatment approach diverged significantly from established interspecies medical guidelines." The Xylar, Elias recognized them as lyrics, one of TYX's classmates, produced a holographic display showing comparative treatment protocols. According to the Galactic Medical Association's recommendations, injuries like TYX's fracture should receive, at minimum, molecular stabilization and regenerative assistance. And yet, Thar continued, your approach has consistently involved minimal intervention, basic physical supports, and waiting. He said the last word as if it were a controversial medical procedure. Elias considered his response carefully. These weren't just anxious students. They were researchers presenting what they believed to be evidence of substandard care. I appreciate your concern, he began, and I understand how my methods might seem inadequate compared to what you're used to. But there's something important you should understand about medical care. More treatment isn't always better treatment. He stood up and projected his own display, showing the recovery data from the cases they'd mentioned. Look at the outcomes. Every student I've treated has recovered completely, often faster than the standard protocols would predict. Why do you think that is? The students exchanged glances. Statistical variance? Offered the Marian uncertainly. Coincidence? Suggested. Lyrics? Thar's ears flattened slightly in thought. Or perhaps an unknown factor in your methodology? It's simpler than that, Elias explained. Most living organisms have evolved incredible healing mechanisms over millions of years. My approach is based on supporting those natural processes rather than overriding them. Sometimes, the most advanced medical technology isn't a replacement for what evolution has already perfected. He could see skepticism in their postures, but also genuine curiosity, especially from Kthar and Xyla. Understand this contradicts much of what you've been taught, he continued. But remember that your species' medical practices developed in specific environments and cultural contexts. Here, we have the opportunity to learn from different approaches. But what about risk? Lyrics asked, their crystalline form reflecting concern. Isn't it safer to implement all available interventions rather than just waiting? Actually, no, Elias replied. Every medical intervention carries its own risks. Unnecessary treatments can disrupt natural healing, create dependence, or cause complications. Good medicine isn't about doing everything possible. It's about doing what's necessary and no more. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with the students raising specific cases and Elias explaining his reasoning. By the end, while he hadn't completely convinced them, he could see the beginnings of understanding, particularly in Kthar's thoughtful expression and Xyla's constantly adjusting leaf sensors. I propose, Kthar said finally, that we continue to monitor outcomes and discuss findings as we proceed. Perhaps there is merit in studying these comparative approaches. Elias nodded. I think that's an excellent idea. My door is always open for these discussions. As the students left, Elias noticed that Xyla lingered behind. Is there something else? He asked. Yes, the plant-based being replied, her voice a gentle rustle. I am curious. Our expedition tomorrow involves some risk. If there were a serious injury, not these minor cases, but something truly life-threatening, would your approach still favor minimal intervention? It was a fair question, perhaps the most important one they could have asked. No, Elias said firmly. I adapt the treatment to the situation. For serious injuries, I'll use every appropriate technology available. The key word is appropriate. He looked directly at Xyla's sensory cluster. My job isn't to use a particular philosophy of medicine. It's to keep all of you safe and healthy, whatever that takes. Xyla's leaves fluttered in what Elias had come to recognize as their version of a nod. Thank you for the clarification, Medic Vance. That is reassuring. Little did either of them know how soon that reassurance would be tested. The first real expedition to the moon's surface began with excitement and meticulous preparation. The small planetoid orbited a gas giant in a stable pattern. Its surface a fascinating landscape of crystalline formations and unusual mineral deposits. For the 32 exchange students, it represented not just a research opportunity, but a chance to apply their varied scientific backgrounds in a novel environment. Elias joined the expedition as the sole medical officer, equipped with both his standard field kit and a larger emergency medical container that could be transported via hoversled. Professor Liu had insisted on comprehensive safety protocols, including buddy systems, regular check-ins, and clear emergency evacuation procedures. The first day passed without incident. The students collected samples, conducted surveys, and established a base camp near a particularly interesting geological formation. Elias spent most of his time monitoring environmental conditions and ensuring that students from environmentally sensitive species were managing their exposure appropriately. On the second day, they ventured further from the landing site, into an area where the crystalline formations grew taller and more complex. The Xyler students were particularly fascinated, noting similarities and differences to the natural formations on their homeworld. These structures show evidence of piezoelectric properties, TYX was explaining to a group of fellow students, including Kthar and Zyla. They respond to pressure by generating small electrical fields, which in turn affects their growth patterns. The group had moved slightly ahead of the main expedition, their enthusiasm carrying them toward a particularly impressive formation that rose nearly 20 meters above the moon's surface. Elias kept them in sight, maintaining a professional distance while letting them conduct their work. He was just checking the atmospheric readings on his monitor when he heard a low rumbling sound. Looking up sharply, he saw the crystalline formation nearest to the student group beginning to shift, tiny fragments, breaking away from its surface. "Everyone back!" he shouted, already running toward them. "The structure is unstable." Most of the students reacted quickly, moving away from the towering crystal. But TYX had been in the midst of collecting a sample from its base and hesitated, caught between retreat and completing their collection. That moment of hesitation proved costly. With a sound like fracturing ice, a large section of the crystal structure sheared away, toppling toward the students. Kthar, displaying impressive reflexes, managed to tackle Zyla clear of the falling debris. 3 other students scrambled to safety. TYX wasn't so fortunate. The crystalline being tried to move at the last moment, but was caught beneath a cascade of crystal fragments. Several other students who had been slightly further back were also struck by the debris field. The aftermath was chaos. Dust filled the air, and cries of pain and alarm rose from multiple sources. Elias reached the scene seconds later, quickly assessing the situation with practiced calm. "Nobody move without checking for injuries first," he commanded, his voice cutting through the panic. "If you're unharmed, help secure the area and watch for further collapse." The uninjured students, still shaken, began to follow his instructions. Elias made his way to where TYX had been partially buried beneath crystalline fragments. The Xyler's own crystalline body was severely fractured in multiple places, with one limb completely separated from the main body. Nearby, a Marian student lay gasping, their hydration field disrupted and a deep gash across their amphibious skin. One of the Zephian gaseous students had suffered a breach in their containment suit, their essence visibly leaking into the atmosphere. Kthar had a bleeding wound across his furred chest, and Zyla's plant-like body showed signs of crushing damage to several primary limbs. Several of the still-mobile students were already activating emergency protocols, deploying their species-specific medical devices. One attempted to place a molecular stabilizer on TYX's shattered form, but the device sparked and failed, not calibrated for the interaction between the Xyler's body and the similar composition of the moon's crystals. "The frequency resonance is wrong," cried one of the other Xyler students. "It's causing further fragmentation." A Marian was attempting to re-establish their injured classmate's hydration field, but the portable generator was struggling under the dusty conditions. The wounded Zephian's companion was trying to patch the containment suit with an emergency sealant that wasn't adhering properly. "Stop!" Elias's voice cut through the growing chaos. "Uncoordinated treatment will make things worse. Everyone not injured, step back and let me work. Kthar, Zyla, if you can move, help me tree off." Despite their own injuries, Kthar and Zyla responded to the authority in his voice, moving to assist. "Kthar, monitor the Zephian's containment breach. Use this." He tossed a small kit from his bag. "It's a universal sealant designed for emergency atmosphere retention. Apply it in a spiral pattern, working inward. Zyla, help me uncover TYX carefully. We need to assess the full extent of the injuries before attempting any stabilization. Working methodically amid the chaos, Elias began implementing emergency field protocols. For TYX, he first ensured that all fragments were collected and properly oriented, then applied a specialized field stabilizer from his emergency kit. Not the complex molecular regenerator the students expected, but a simple device that reduced vibration and movement. This will prevent further fracturing until we can get you to proper facilities, he explained to the frightened Zyler. Your separated limb can be reintegrated, but we need to maintain the proper crystalline alignment. For the injured Marion, he bypassed the malfunctioning hydration field entirely, instead applying a specialized biomedical gel that would prevent moisture loss while simultaneously delivering antibacterial agents to the wound. This isn't as comfortable as your field, he told the amphibious student, but it will keep you stable until we can evacuate. Moving to the Zephian, he found Kthar had successfully applied the sealant, stopping the gaseous being's essence from escaping further. Elias quickly attached a small pressure regulator to maintain the suit's integrity. Good work, he told Kthar, before turning his attention to the feline being's own injury. The gash across Kthar's chest was deep, but had narrowly missed vital areas. With rapid, practiced movements, Elias cleaned the wound, applied a coagulating agent, and sealed it with a flexible medical adhesive. This will hold until we can get you proper sutures, he explained. Try to minimize movement to reduce strain on the seal. Finally, he tended to Zyla, whose plant-based physiology presented unique challenges. Several of her limbs had been crushed, disrupting the flow of nutrients and causing visible wilting. I'm going to apply a splint and a specialized nutrient solution, Elias explained, working quickly but gently. It will support the damaged tissues and provide essential elements until your body can reroute its internal systems. Throughout the crisis, Elias maintained a calm, focused demeanor that gradually spread to the injured students and their companions. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, applying treatments that were often simpler than what the students expected, but perfectly suited to the emergency conditions. When the immediate life-threatening conditions had been stabilized, Elias activated the emergency evacuation protocol. Within 20 minutes, a medical transport arrived from a main station, and the injured students were carefully loaded aboard. As they prepared for departure, Lyrics approached Elias, their crystalline form vibrating with a frequency that conveyed deep emotion. You saved TYX, they said. Our medical simulations indicated that such extensive fracturing would require a full molecular reconstruction chamber within minutes to prevent permanent dissolution. Elias secured the last of his equipment. Sometimes the simulations don't account for real-world conditions. TYX will need specialized care, but the fractures were stabilized in time. But you didn't use any of the advanced technologies we thought were essential, Lyrics continued, clearly struggling to reconcile their understanding with what they had witnessed. Just basic field medicine. The best technology in an emergency is the one that works, Elias replied simply. Now, let's get everyone back to the station. The aftermath of the crystal collapse marked a turning point. As the injured students recovered under Elias's care, supplemented by appropriate specialized treatments, once they were back in the controlled environment of the station, attitudes began to shift noticeably. TYX's recovery was particularly remarkable. The Zyler's separated limb was successfully reintegrated, and the fractures were healing with minimal internal scarring, a process that TYX admitted would have involved weeks of painful molecular manipulation on their homeworld. The reduced vibration field you applied preserved the crystalline memory pattern at the fracture sites, TYX explained to Elias during a follow-up examination. Our traditional treatments often override these patterns, requiring artificial reconstruction. But my body has been able to follow its original template for reassembly. Kthar's wound healed rapidly with minimal intervention, the mammalion's natural regenerative abilities functioning efficiently once the initial injury was properly cleaned and sealed. The Marian skin repaired itself under the biomedical gel, which Elias removed after just 3 days, revealing healthy amphibious tissue beneath. Even Xyla, whose crushed limbs had initially seemed beyond saving, showed remarkable recovery. The plant-based being had developed new growth around the damaged areas, incorporating the nutrients from Elias's solution into vibrant new tissues. As the physical recoveries progressed, Elias found himself engaged in increasingly frequent discussions with students who now approached him not with skepticism, but with genuine curiosity. Kthar became a regular visitor to the medical office, his feline eyes watching intently as Elias performed routine treatments and follow-ups. On my homeworld, Kthar explained one afternoon, our medical tradition emphasizes technological intervention. Our ancient healing practices, which relied more on supporting natural recovery, have been largely abandoned as primitive. That's not uncommon, Elias replied, organizing supplies as they talked. Many species go through phases where they become enamored with their own technological capabilities, sometimes overlooking the wisdom in their traditional approaches. You speak as if this were a universal pattern, Xyla noted. The plant-based being had joined Kthar for what had become something of an informal seminar. Elias smiled. It seems to be. Humans went through it too. For a while, we thought technology could solve every medical problem, that more treatment was always better. It took us time to find the balance, to recognize when to intervene aggressively and when to step back and support the body's own healing systems. This is fascinating. Xyla's leaf sensors fluttered with interest. In my species' medical tradition, we have always emphasized environmental factors and nutrient balance over direct intervention. I had begun to believe this approach was outdated compared to the molecular manipulations used by many other species. Different physiologies, different needs, Elias acknowledged. But the principle often holds, supporting natural processes when possible, intervening directly when necessary. These conversations expanded over the following weeks, with more students joining. Elias found himself informally teaching comparative medical philosophy, while also learning about the unique approaches developed by various species. He was particularly interested in the Florians' use of specialized nutrient compounds and the Zephians' understanding of gaseous pressure dynamics as a healing mechanism. The dynamic at the station shifted subtly, but significantly. When minor injuries or ailments occurred, students now came to Elias without the former panic, describing their symptoms with greater objectivity. They listened to his assessment and followed his recommendations, even when those recommendations were simply to rest, apply cooling or heating, and allow their bodies to heal naturally. More significantly, they began to integrate their own species' knowledge with Elias's approach, creating informal hybrid treatments that combine the best aspects of multiple traditions. During one particularly productive session, Kthar made an observation that resonated with the assembled group. Perhaps what we're discovering is that resilience itself is a universal trait, expressed differently across species, but fundamentally similar. The ability to recover, adapt, and thrive despite injury or stress. That's a profound insight, Elias agreed. And maybe understanding that resilience, how to support it rather than bypass it, is the true foundation of good medicine, regardless of the species involved. 3 months after the initial orientation day, the station held a symposium where research teams presented their findings from the expedition. Among the scientific presentations was a special session on comparative medical approaches in multi-species environments, led jointly by Elias, Kthar, and Xyla. The session drew attendance not just from the exchange students, but from permanent station personnel and visiting researchers. As Elias listened to Kthar eloquently explaining the principles of resilience-supported healing they had documented, he felt a sense of satisfaction that transcended his initial misgivings about the assignment. After the formal presentations, Professor Liu approached him, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. When I requested a medical officer for this exchange program, I never expected it would result in what might be a breakthrough in interspecies medical philosophy, she admitted. The students have submitted a formal proposal to establish an ongoing research project on resilience-based healing across different physiologies. They did the real work, Elias replied. I just patched them up along the way. Don't underestimate your contribution, Lou insisted. Sometimes the most important lessons don't come from formal instruction, but from watching how someone responds in a crisis. Later that evening, Elias found himself sitting in the station's observation lounge with Kthar and Zyla. Through the transparent dome, the gas giant and its crystalline moon dominated the view, a stunning backdrop to their conversation. The exchange program ends next week, Kthar noted, his purring voice thoughtful. Many of us will return to our homeworlds. Will you continue this line of research? Elias asked. Zyla's leaves rustled affirmatively. Several of us have already secured funding for a multi-species medical research initiative. We've even convinced some of our homeworld's leading medical practitioners to participate. And TYX has become something of a celebrity case study among the Xylars, Kthar added with amusement. Their recovery using what they're calling minimally invasive stabilization techniques has challenged several established medical protocols. Elias smiled, watching the slow dance of cosmic bodies outside. Every field advances when dogma gets challenged by evidence. There is one thing I've been meaning to ask you, Zyla said after a moment. That first day, when TYX was injured and you simply applied cooling and told them, just ice it and you'll be fine, did you know with certainty that would be sufficient, or was there an element of what humans call educated guessing? Elias chuckled. A bit of both. Experience teaches you to recognize patterns, to distinguish between truly serious injuries and those that look worse than they are. But there's always an element of judgment, of trusting both your knowledge and the remarkable healing capacity life has developed across billions of years of evolution. I believe there's wisdom in that approach, Kthar said, his tail sweeping thoughtfully across the floor. Balancing knowledge with humility about what we don't know, and respect for the resilience inherent in living systems. Exactly, Elias agreed. Sometimes the most advanced medical approach is knowing when not to intervene, when to simply ice it and trust that you'll be fine. As they sat together, watching the stars and sharing insights from their vastly different perspectives, Elias reflected on how his initial reluctance about this assignment had transformed into one of the most rewarding experiences of his career. He had come to teach these students about human medical approaches, but had ended up learning as much as he taught about different physiologies, different healing traditions, and the universal principles that connected them all. And perhaps most importantly, he had helped bridge a gap in understanding, not just about medicine, but about the resilience and adaptability that characterized life in all its diverse forms across the galaxy. Sometimes, the simplest solutions were indeed the best, and sometimes healing required nothing more complex than creating the right conditions and trusting in the remarkable resilience life had developed over countless generations of evolution. Just ice it and you'll be fine. A simple phrase that had sparked a transformation in interspecies medical understanding, and a philosophy that Elias knew would continue to spread long after these students returned to their homeworlds, carrying with them not just knowledge, but a new perspective on healing across the cosmos.